Is he the one, Mommy? The question piped in a small, clear voice, sliced through the ballroom's sophisticated hum, sharp as shattered crystal. 4 pairs of identical grey eyes, his eyes an unmistakable echo of his own reflection, were fixed on Marcus Sterling. They stood beside their mother, his ex-wife Eleanor Hayes, her face a pale, unreadable mask. Then another small voice, equally clear, devastatingly direct, aimed straight at his fracturing composure. Are you our father? A question hanging in the glittering air, heavy enough to shatter Marcus Sterling's meticulously constructed world. Before we dive into the silence that followed, what do you think is racing through his mind, or Eleanor's? Share your immediate thoughts and predictions in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single, unbelievable moment as this story unfolds. The crystal chandeliers of the Grand Astoria's ballroom dripped light like frozen tears, each one reflecting the hollow ache in Marcus Sterling's chest. He, the titan of Sterling Industries, a man whose pronouncements could shift markets, stood alone amidst the glittering throng of New York's elite. The official reason for his solitude tonight was a last-minute cancellation by Serena Croft, his impeccably curated girlfriend. The truth, however, was a raw, more personal sorrow, a quiet anniversary of a loss he rarely allowed himself to acknowledge, a day that always left him feeling heartbroken. He adjusted the silk lapels of his bespoke suit, a familiar mask of cool command settling over features that magazines often described as impassively handsome. Tonight, that impassivity felt less like control, and more like a dam holding back a flood. He nodded curtly at Arthur Davies, his company's chairman, who was deep in conversation about something undoubtedly important. Marcus's mind, however, was miles away, replaying a faint, almost forgotten melody from a chapter of his life he'd believed was firmly closed, a chapter titled Eleanor Hayes. The name still carried a ghost of warmth, a whisper of what might have been, before ambition had become his all-consuming mistress. He'd thought he'd successfully archived those memories, filed them under lessons learned, or more accurately, opportunities missed. A waiter, silent as a shadow, offered champagne. Marcus took a flute, the chilled glass, a stark contrast to the turmoil within. His gaze drifted a practiced sweep of the room, cataloguing faces, assessing power dynamics. A habit he couldn't shake, even when his heart felt like a lead weight. And then he saw her. Across the opulent space, near a display of ice sculptures that mimicked the glacial state of his current mood, stood Eleanor. Time had been kind, etching a new maturity onto her familiar features, a quiet strength in her posture he didn't remember, or perhaps hadn't valued years ago. She wore a simple navy dress, an island of understated elegance in a sea of ostentatious gowns. But it wasn't just Eleanor who made the champagne flute tremble in his hand, threatening to shatter the illusion of his composure. It was the small constellation around her. 4 young boys, 4 small identical figures, their dark hair catching the light in the same way his own did. 4 pairs of impossibly familiar, serious grey eyes. His eyes. One of them a sturdy-looking boy with an air of a tiny general seemed to be Caleb, the one Eleanor had named after her grandfather. Another with a thoughtful frown that Marcus recognized from his own childhood photographs peered intently at the ice sculpture. That had to be Noah. A third, slightly more reserved with an almost ethereal quality, sketched furiously in a small pad, his tongue caught between his teeth in concentration. Elias, no doubt. And the fourth, a whirlwind of barely contained energy, was currently attempting to sneak a canapé from a passing tray, his movements quick and mischievous, that Marcus registered with a jolt that ran through him like an electric current, must be Liam. Liam, noticing Marcus's fixed stare, paused his canapé quest. He tugged on Eleanor's dress and piped up his voice, carrying with the innocent clarity of childhood. "Mommy is that man in the shiny suit, the one from the really, really tall building downtown. He looks just like the picture in your old—" Ouch. His sentence ended as Eleanor gently shushed him, her eyes widening as she followed Liam's pointing finger directly to Marcus. The ambient chatter of the gala, the clinking of glasses, the swell of the string quartet, it all faded into a dull, distant roar. Marcus Sterling, a man who prided himself on navigating hostile takeovers and boardroom battles with an unshakable nerve, felt the world tilt on its axis. He could negotiate billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, but the sight of those 4 miniature versions of himself, existing breathing, being rendered him momentarily speechless. Eleanor's face, initially pale with shock, settled into a look of resigned composure. She whispered something to the boys, who then turned in near-perfect unison to fix him with 8 identical grey eyes, their expressions a mixture of childish curiosity and an unnerving shared solemnity. Noah ever the pragmatist, even at what Marcus guessed was 5 or 6 years old, tilted his head and muttered just loud enough for Marcus to imagine he heard it across the distance. The statistical probability of such precise genetic recurrence outside of identical siblings is remarkably low. Serena Croft, who had apparently made a miraculous recovery from her sudden headache, and now stood at the edge of the cluster of onlookers that had begun to subtly form, chose that exact moment to glide to Marcus's side. Her perfectly manicured hand rested possessively on his arm. Her voice, a silken question laced with an edge of steel. "Marcus, darling, you look like you've seen a ghost." Or perhaps she added her gaze, flicking pointedly towards Eleanor and the boys, a whole family of them. Marcus barely registered Serena's presence. His world had narrowed to the impossible, undeniable truth standing a mere 20 feet away. 4 sons. His sons. He thought of the crushing loneliness that had been his companion for years, the sterile perfection of his penthouse, the hollow victories. Boardroom negotiations, he thought with a sudden, absurd clarity, were infinitely easier than facing these 4 pairs of accusing, inquisitive his eyes. A fleeting memory surfaced. Eleanor years ago, laughing her head, thrown back a whispered promise under a summer sky about a future filled with a different kind of sterling legacy. A promise he had buried deep and deliberately under layers of ambition and drive. Until now. Now it seemed the past had not only caught up with him, it had multiplied. The air in the Astoria's private alcove, hastily secured by a flustered event manager at Marcus's curt request, was thick with unspoken words. Serena Croft had been politely, yet firmly excluded, her perfectly sculpted outrage a silent, simmering counterpoint to the main event. Marcus Sterling, a man accustomed to commanding any room he entered, now found himself in the unfamiliar territory of a family meeting. 4 pairs of identical grey eyes, so like his own, studied him with varying degrees of intensity, while Eleanor Hayes, their mother, maintained a calm that was both admirable and to Marcus slightly unnerving. So Marcus began the single word, sounding inadequate even to his own ears. He cleared his throat. "Eleanor." "It's been a long time." Eleanor offered a small, wry smile. "About 5.5 years, Marcus. Or to be more precise, 4 suns ago." Caleb, the sturdy miniature general, stepped slightly forward. "Are you really our dad?" he asked, his voice surprisingly firm for a child his age. "Mommy has a picture of a man who looks like you in a box. She says he was good at building empires, but maybe not Lego forts." My current fort needs a new strategic investor. Marcus blinked, momentarily thrown. I believe I am Caleb, and I have some experience with strategic investments. Noah, the thoughtful one, adjusted imaginary glasses. Based on observable genetic traits, the probability is exceedingly high. I've calculated that if you previously allocated 87.3% of your daily hours to empire building, what is the projected percentage for paternal obligations? Before Marcus could formulate an answer that wouldn't sound like a quarterly report, Liam, the energetic one, bounced on the balls of his feet. Can you fly or turn into a superhero? Mommy says superheroes are very busy, but they always make it home for dinner, even if they have to fight a giant space octopus. First, Elias. The quiet artist simply continued to sketch in his pad, occasionally glancing up at Marcus with an unnervingly perceptive gaze. Marcus had a fleeting, uneasy feeling that any abstract details Elias might be adding to his portrait, horns perhaps, or a comically oversized tie, would be entirely justified. Eleanor finally intervened, a hint of amusement in her voice. Boys, perhaps we can save the due diligence and superhero assessments for later. Mr. Sterling. Marcus is understandably a little surprised. She turned to him. Welcome to the real world, Marcus. It's a lot louder than a boardroom, and the quarterly earnings are usually measured in scraped knees and bedtime stories successfully negotiated. The fragile truce of this impromptu meeting was, however, being monitored. Outside the alcove, Serena fumed, her mind racing. This complication, these children were an unacceptable variable in her carefully constructed life plan. She made a discreet call. Later, Raymond Ray Cole, Marcus's unflappable head of security, would report a sudden, suspiciously keen interest from a notorious paparazzi agency known to have connections with Marcus's business rival, Donovan Shaw. The next few days were a blur for Marcus. He arranged through a slightly bewildered Helen Foster, his executive assistant, for a more private, controlled meeting at a neutral venue, a child-friendly wing of a private city club. His first attempts at direct interaction were educational. He'd once orchestrated a hostile takeover of a rival tech firm with less trepidation than he now felt attempting to read a bedtime story to 4 wriggling, opinionated critics simultaneously. The story, a classic tale of a brave knight, somehow ended up as a bizarre mashup involving a dragon who preferred venture capitalism to princesses, a talking squirrel who demanded stock options, and a knight who seriously considered outsourcing the damsel in distress rescue. That's not how it goes. Daddy Marcus Liam had giggled the newly coined provisional title, sending another jolt through Marcus. His culinary attempts were even more unique. An effort to make pancakes resulted in what Noah charitably described as unidentified breakfast objects, with a curious, smoky aftertaste. Marcus found himself recalling Eleanor's earlier quip about financial reports being simpler than convincing 4 children to eat broccoli. She hadn't been exaggerating. Yet amidst the chaos, something began to shift within him. Watching Elias lose himself in his drawings, the intensity of his focus, a mirror of Marcus's own concentration during a high-stakes negotiation, discussing the aerodynamics of paper airplanes with Noah, whose intellect was startling, attempting to keep up with Liam's boundless energy, which could power a small city, and even fielding Caleb's surprisingly shrewd questions about return on investment for new toys. It all chipped away at the icy facade he'd maintained for years. This was a different kind of empire, a different kind of wealth, and the realization of what he'd missed, what he'd unknowingly been deprived of, was a far more profound shock than the initial sight of them. Later that week, while Ray Cole was gravely informing Marcus about a minor security incident, so the subject codenamed Liam apparently attempted to interface with my encrypted tablet in pursuit of something called Mega Robot Deathmatch 3. Our cyber defenses are being reviewed for child-proofing. Eleanor watched Marcus trying to help Elias find the exact shade of blue for a sky in his drawing. The CEO, usually so decisive, was now patiently sifting through a box of crayons, a small, thoughtful frown on his face. Suddenly, Liam, who had been attempting to build a tower out of sugar cubes, let out a wail. The tower had collapsed, and a rogue sugar cube had apparently shot into Noah's intricate construction of a miniature solar system, dislodging Jupiter. Tears welled in Liam's eyes, and Noah looked on the verge of a scientific meltdown. Before Eleanor could react, Marcus was there. He knelt, his expensive suit instantly forgotten. Hey, what's this? Liam Champion builders know that sometimes things fall. We just build them stronger, right? He then turned to Noah. And Professor Noah, I believe even Jupiter has its wobbly days. A minor orbital readjustment, perhaps nothing a top celestial engineer like yourself can't handle. His voice was calm, reassuring. He didn't solve the problem, not really, but he diffused the impending twin tantrums with an unexpected, almost paternal ease. Eleanor watched a complex mix of emotions swirling within her. Surprise, a grudging admiration, and a tiny hesitant flicker of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel for Marcus Sterling in a very long time. Just then, Marcus's personal phone, the one reserved for truly urgent matters, buzzed. It was a news alert from a disreputable gossip blog. The headline, stark and sensational, screamed across the screen, "Billionaire CEO's secret quadruplets. Marcus Sterling's skeletons tumble out of the penthouse closet." Below it, a grainy but unmistakable photo of him, Eleanor, and the 4 boys taken just days ago outside the private club. Marcus's face went ashen. The fragile, chaotic, unexpectedly heartwarming new world he had just begun to navigate had suddenly brutally collided with the old one. The grainy photograph on the gossip blog was merely the opening salvo. In the days that followed, Marcus Sterling's life, once a meticulously ordered symphony of high-stakes business and carefully managed public appearances, descended into a chaotic opera. His phone buzzed incessantly with calls from concerned board members, opportunistic rivals, and a suddenly very attentive Serena Croft, whose voice now oscillated between saccharine sympathy and thinly veiled accusation. Meanwhile, Raymond Ray Cole, Marcus's head of security, and Daniel Pierce, his sharp-witted lawyer and old friend, were unearthing a far more insidious plot. It seems Miss Croft's talents extend beyond selecting the perfect charity gala gown, Marcus Daniel commented dryly during an emergency meeting in Marcus's study, a room usually reserved for dissecting corporate adversaries, not personal betrayals. He slid a preliminary report across the polished mahogany desk. There are irregularities, substantial funds rerouted through shell corporations with rather creative names. And guess who appears to have a beneficial interest in a few of them? Our old friend, Donovan Shaw. Donovan Shaw, Marcus's business nemesis, a man whose ambition was matched only by his apparent lack of scruples. The idea of Serena colluding with him was a bitter pill. So it wasn't just about the shock of my expanded family, Marcus said, a grim understanding dawning. This leak was a calculated move, pressure, destabilization, before the Westlake merger. Precisely, Daniel confirmed, and Miss Croft, with her access and, shall we say, theatrical abilities, seems to have been a key player. Frankly, with her talent for duplicity, she should consider a career in Hollywood, not just dabbling in insider trading. The media frenzy, of course, had an immediate impact on Eleanor and the boys. Paparazzi, like patient vultures, began to circle Eleanor's modest apartment building. Elias, always sensitive to emotional currents, grew quieter, his sketches taking on a darker, more shadowed tone. Caleb, bless his resilient little heart, appointed himself chief protector of his brothers, puffing out his small chest and glaring at any unfamiliar car that lingered too long on their street. "Don't worry, Dad," he declared to Marcus during one of their video calls, his small face serious. "If any bad guys come, I'll build a giant Lego wall so high they can't get in." Eleanor, though visibly strained, handled the siege with her characteristic fortitude. During one particularly tense phone call with Marcus, while he was outlining a complex legal strategy, she'd interrupted him. Marcus, she'd said, her voice, calm but firm, amidst the sound of what he could only guess was Liam attempting to use a saucepan as a drum. "Before you deploy your corporate shock troops, remember these are children, not hostile shareholders. And for what it's worth, this whole situation feels less like a corporate espionage thriller and more like a family merger gone spectacularly sideways." Her unexpected dry wit momentarily cut through his anxiety, a reminder of the woman he'd once loved, the woman who was now impossibly back in the chaotic center of his life. The confrontation with Serena, when it finally happened, was not in a boardroom, but in the sterile luxury of the penthouse she still technically shared with him. She'd been waiting, dressed in a deceptively soft cashmere sweater, an expression of wounded innocence artfully arranged on her face. "Marcus, darling, all these terrible things they're saying. About you, about us." She began, her voice trembling. Marcus cut her off, his own voice, devoid of its usual warmth. "Save the performance, Serena. Daniel Pierce has already given me the highlights. The offshore accounts, the convenient tips to Donovan Shaw. Was I just a stepping stone? Or did the heartbroken CEO act play better for your long game?" Her eyes narrowed the victimhood, vanishing like mist in the sun. "Don't be a fool, Marcus. This situation with your ex-wife and those children, it's a disaster. I was trying to protect what we have. Protect what we have." Marcus echoed a humorless smile, touching his lips as he thought, "Or what my bank account has. There is no we, Serena." There was an arrangement, a convenient illusion, and it seems I was the only one not in on the full script. He felt a cold anger not just at her betrayal, but at his own profound blindness. It was during this very charged exchange that his private line, the one only Helen Foster, and now Eleanor, had rang. He glanced at the caller ID, Eleanor. He held up a hand to silence Serena's indignant sputtering. "Excuse me," he said, the ice in his voice unmistakable. "This is important." He answered, his tone softening almost imperceptibly. "Eleanor, is everything all right?" Her voice was tight with worry. "Marcus, it's Elias. He won't come out from under his bed. He heard something on the news, some awful man yelling about you, and us. And he's terrified. He keeps asking if they're going to take his drawing pencils away." Something inside Marcus snapped. The intricate web of corporate maneuvering, the sting of Serena's betrayal, the potential damage to his company. It all receded, dwarfed by the image of his small, sensitive son, cowering under a bed, afraid for his pencils. This was not a hostile takeover. This was his child. He looked at Serena, her face a mask of impatient fury. He thought of Donovan Shaw relishing this chaos, and he made his choice. "Serena," he said, his voice low and dangerously calm, "get your things. You have 1 hour. Then my security will escort you out. Any assets you've acquired through your association with me will be frozen by morning. Daniel will be in touch with Mr. Adler regarding the full extent of the evidence we've compiled. You can't, I can." Marcus stated the certainty in his voice, absolute. "You and Donovan Shaw have underestimated me. You thought you were targeting my business. You were wrong. You targeted my family." He paused. "And that Serena is a line you don't cross." After she'd stormed out, a whirlwind of expensive perfume and impotent rage, Marcus sank into a chair, the adrenaline slowly ebbing. He dialed Daniel Pierce. "Daniel, pivot the strategy. Yes, we pursue every legal avenue against Croft and Shaw, but our primary objective now is a complete lockdown on any media that exploits or harms my children, whatever it takes, and prepare a statement, not from the CEO of Sterling Industries, from Marcus Sterling, a father." He hung up and immediately called Eleanor. "I'm on my way," he said. "Tell Elias his dad is coming, and no one is touching his pencils." For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, amidst the wreckage of his old life, and the daunting uncertainty of the new Marcus Sterling, felt a sliver of something that might one day grow into peace. He had made his stand. The fallout from Marcus Sterling's newly public private life was predictably immense. Tabloids feasted, stock analysts pontificated, and the Sterling Industries boardroom buzzed with an anxiety usually reserved for hostile takeover bids. Arthur Davies, the pragmatic chairman, convened an emergency meeting, his expression a mixture of concern and a surprising, almost paternal curiosity. Marcus Arthur began, his voice resonating through the tense silence of the boardroom. "The optics of this are challenging. The board requires assurance regarding stability. Your leadership." Marcus met his gaze squarely. "Arthur, gentlemen, my commitment to Sterling Industries is unwavering. However, my commitment to my 4 sons is absolute. There will be stability. There will be leadership. But there will also be a father who shows up." True to his word, Marcus orchestrated a press conference, not in the sterile environment of a corporate headquarters, but in a softer, more human setting. Helen Foster, his ever-efficient assistant, handed him a glass of water just before he stepped onto the podium. "Good luck, sir," she'd murmured. "For what it's worth, this is a tougher room than the Senate Banking Committee. At least they don't usually ask about your favorite dinosaur." Marcus had actually managed a small smile at that. Facing a phalanx of cameras and reporters, he spoke not as a CEO defending his stock price, but as a man, a father owning his past and embracing his future. He was direct, honest, and disarmingly candid. When one particularly tenacious journalist asked how he planned to balance the demands of a multi-billion-dollar corporation with raising 4 young children, Marcus paused. Frankly, he admitted a refreshingly honest tone, cutting through the usual corporate spin, some days remembering the names of all the characters in my son's favorite animated series, Galaxy Guardians Go. Presents a more immediate cognitive challenge than deciphering the clauses in a complex merger agreement. But he added a genuine warmth, infusing his voice. "It's a challenge I wouldn't trade for anything." The unexpected humor, the sheer relatability of his admission, did more for his image than 1,000 carefully crafted PR statements. The real changes, however, happened not in front of cameras, but within the quiet, often chaotic rhythm of his new life. Marcus's schedule, once a fortress of back-to-back meetings and international flights, was systematically dismantled and rebuilt. Non-essential travel was delegated. Evening commitments were ruthlessly culled. He discovered the foreign concepts of school pickup lines and homework assistance, the latter often requiring frantic, surreptitious Googling on advanced 4th-grade mathematics he was sure hadn't existed in his day. He attended the school's annual art and science extravaganza. He stood a little awkwardly at first amongst the other parents, watching Noah passionately explain his meticulously constructed volcano, which thankfully only simulated an eruption. He listened as Caleb, with surprising gravitas, presented his group's diorama of a medieval castle. He even found himself genuinely impressed by Liam's enthusiastic, if somewhat abstract, interpretive dance about the life cycle of a butterfly. It was Mrs. Evans Elias's kindergarten teacher who provided another small, illuminating moment. "Mr. Sterling," she said, approaching him with a kind smile, "Elias's latest portrait of you is quite something. He's captured your likeness, of course, but he's given you 6 arms this time. He explained it's because you need them all to give enough hugs to him and his brothers." Marcus felt a warmth spread through his chest that no successful stock market flotation had ever managed to ignite. The idea for the Sterling Family Foundation began to solidify during these weeks. It wasn't a PR stunt, but a genuine desire born from witnessing Eleanor's quiet strength and understanding on a visceral level the challenges faced by parents, especially single parents. He discussed it with Eleanor one evening after the boys were finally asleep, the house filled with a peaceful, toy-strewn calm. "I want it to be real, Eleanor," he said, watching her sketch idly on a notepad, a habit she'd retained. "Not just a tax write-off. Something that actually helps supports families' education." Eleanor looked up, her gaze thoughtful. "It's a good idea, Marcus. A very good one." A comfortable silence settled between them, punctuated by the distant hum of city traffic and the occasional sleepy sigh from one of the boys' rooms. They were co-parenting, navigating the daily circus of 4 active boys, and in the shared laughter over a particularly messy dinner or the quiet teamwork of a bedtime routine, something akin to their old camaraderie, overlaid with new understanding, was beginning to bloom. One Saturday, Marcus found himself on his hands and knees in the park, a monster being valiantly defeated by 4 giggling knights armed with plastic swords. He was muddy, his expensive casual wear was likely ruined, and he hadn't felt this genuinely light, this unburdened in years. He caught Eleanor's eye as she watched from a nearby bench, a soft, almost tender smile playing on her lips. Later, as they walked home, the boys chattering excitedly ahead of them, Eleanor spoke. "You know," she said, her voice quiet, that shade of monster mud. "It's surprisingly becoming on you, Marcus." He chuckled, a real, unforced sound. "Perhaps I'll add it to my corporate color palette." The path ahead was still uncertain. Donovan Shaw and Serena Croft hadn't simply vanished, though Daniel Pierce assured him their legal options were dwindling rapidly. But as Marcus looked at Eleanor, at the easy way she managed their boisterous sons, at the cautious hope that was beginning to dawn in her eyes, when she looked at him, he felt a profound shift. The old Marcus Sterling was still there, the shrewd businessman, the relentless achiever. But a new Marcus was emerging, one who understood that the most valuable assets weren't listed on any stock exchange. The ensuing months saw the final decisive unraveling of Donovan Shaw's machinations and Serena Croft's ambitions. Daniel Pierce, with a surgeon's precision, dismantled their web of deceit in court. Donovan Shaw's company faced a federal investigation that effectively ended his reign, while Serena, stripped of her ill-gotten gains and facing her own legal battles, faded from the society pages. A small, almost overlooked article later noted her new venture, online courses on achieving your inner power through strategic alliances. Subscriptions, the article dryly observed, were modest. Marcus Sterling, true to his new compass, formally transitioned to the role of chairman of Sterling Industries, passing the CEO baton to the capable Mr. Mitchell. Arthur Davies, at the announcement, had clapped him on the shoulder, a rare smile creasing his features. "Some investments yield more than just financial returns," Marcus had said. "I suspect this new venture of yours, fatherhood, will prove to be your most profitable yet." The venture of fatherhood was indeed proving to be an education. The search for a new family home became a lively group project. As they toured a spacious, sun-filled house with a sprawling, slightly wild garden, the boys immediately began staking their claims. "This room with the big window will be my command center," Caleb announced, already planning troop movements. "And this one with the good light, perfect for my new laboratory," Noah declared, peering at the electrical outlets with intense concentration. Elias simply found a quiet corner and began sketching the garden, a look of serene focus on his face. Liam, meanwhile, was testing the structural integrity of the staircase banister. "Can this be my slide?" he yelled. Marcus caught Eleanor's eye over the joyful cacophony. I think he said, a grin spreading across his face. "We're going to need a house with considerably more wings, and perhaps some built-in soundproofing." The Sterling Family Foundation launched a few weeks later, not with a lavish gala, but with a quiet community event. Eleanor, as its executive director, spoke with an eloquence and passion that captivated everyone, outlining their mission to support underprivileged children and single-parent families. Marcus watched her, his heart swelling with a pride that was deeper and more resonant than any business triumph. Life settled into a new, vibrant rhythm. There were school runs, chaotic breakfasts, bedtime stories that often involved impromptu character voices from Marcus. His attempt at a dragon was a particular source of hilarity for the boys, and weekend adventures that usually ended with everyone pleasantly exhausted and covered in a fine layer of mud or paint. One crisp autumn afternoon, as the boys were enthusiastically and messily carving pumpkins in their new kitchen, Marcus found Eleanor alone for a moment in the garden, a soft smile on her face as she watched their sons. He walked over to her, a small velvet box feeling surprisingly heavy in his pocket. "Eleanor," he began, his voice a little unsteady, a stark contrast to the confident CEO who once addressed thousands. "These past few months, they've been the most challenging, the most chaotic, and without a doubt the most rewarding of my entire life." He took her hand. "I know I made mistakes. Big ones. I chose ambition over everything that truly mattered. I was a fool." He knelt not with the practiced flourish of a movie hero, but with a sincerity that made Eleanor's breath catch. "I'm not asking you to forget that, but I am asking, hoping, if you'd give this reformed fool, this work-in-progress father, a chance to build a future with you. Not just for them," he nodded towards the happy shouts from the kitchen, "but for us." He opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant diamond ring that shimmered in the afternoon light. "Eleanor Hayes, will you marry me again? And perhaps this time we can get the happily ever after part right." Before Eleanor could even form a word, a small voice piped up from the doorway. Liam Pumpkin, seeds stuck to his cheek, peered out. "Daddy Marcus," he asked, his head tilted, "are you asking Mummy to be your full-time, forever super mummy? Now, does that mean we get extra dessert?" Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes, but they were tears of laughter, of joy, of a profound heart-healing relief. She looked from Liam's hopeful face to Marcus's earnest, upturned one. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, as she extended her hand. "Yes to all of it." Later that evening, after the pumpkins were carved into an assortment of lopsided grins and 4 very tired boys were finally tucked into bed, Marcus found Eleanor by the fireplace. Noah had left his latest highly complex science project, a concoction of baking soda vinegar and food coloring that had nearly caused a small kitchen incident, on the coffee table. Marcus, despite his best efforts, had failed to grasp the fundamental principles, but had earned an A for effort from his son. Eleanor leaned her head on his shoulder. "You know," she said softly, "this happily ever after. It's going to be incredibly noisy." Marcus Sterling, chairman, philanthropist, father and soon-to-be husband again, wrapped his arm around her, a deep contentment settling in his soul. "I wouldn't have it any other way," he murmured, looking into the flames. He finally understood. True wealth wasn't measured in stock portfolios or corporate conquests. It was measured in shared laughter, in sticky fingers, in bedtime stories, in the comforting weight of a hand in his, and in the 4 small miraculous heartbeats that had against all odds led him home. And so Marcus Sterling's world, once shattered by an impossible truth, was rebuilt not with the cold steel of commerce, but with the enduring warmth of family laughter and second chances. It makes one wonder, doesn't it? How often life offers us a clear path to rediscover what truly matters and the courage it takes to walk it, transforming a legacy of wealth into one of genuine love. These journeys of the heart, with their unexpected turns and profound lessons, echo in all our lives in ways we might not always see. This story of redemption and the extraordinary power of family certainly gave us a lot to reflect on, and we imagine it might have for you too. What particular moment in Marcus's transformation, or perhaps Eleanor's quiet resilience, resonated most deeply with you, or looking at their journey? What do you believe is the most crucial ingredient for rebuilding trust after years of distance? We'd be truly grateful to read your insights and feelings in the comments below. Your thoughtful feedback is also what helps us grow and bring you even more compelling stories. If you have any suggestions for future narratives, or how we can make these experiences even better, please do share them with us. If Marcus and Eleanor's story touched your heart, a like would mean the world to us. And if you believe this message of hope and change could inspire someone else, please feel free to share it. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you can join us for every new emotional journey we embark on, together exploring more tales that warm the heart and stir the soul. Thank you for being with us through this story. Until next time, take care.